A blind boy and his service dog are suddenly attacked by police. And then this happened. He can't see what's happening around him, but he can hear everything. The shouting, the taser crackling, his dog's cry. What starts as a routine walk home turns into a nightmare that shocks an entire town. But what no one knows is that this boy heard something the night before. Something no one else noticed. A sound that could expose a deadly secret and bring down the people who hurt him. Now, every step he takes, every sound he hears, could be the key to the truth, or the reason he disappears. Why would officers attack a blind child and his dog? What was he never supposed to hear? And when the truth finally comes out, who will still be standing? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Port Heron's riverfront path as Mercer Lane walked alongside Harbor, his trusted yellow Labrador service dog. The familiar tap of Harbor's paws on the concrete and the gentle jingling of his harness tags created a soothing rhythm that Mercer had come to know by heart over their years together. Though Mercer couldn't see the water, he could smell its brackish scent and hear the lazy lap of waves against the shoreline. These daily walks were more than just routine. They were how Mercer mapped his world through sound, smell, and the steady presence of Harbor at his side. Then he heard it, a mechanical rattle whistle that cut through the ambient river sounds, making Mercer's head snap up. His heart began to race as his mind connected the dots. That sound. He knew that sound. It was exactly like the one from the hit-and-run accident he'd heard days ago. "Harbor, wait," Mercer whispered, his hand tightening on the harness. He needed to call his dad right away. Thaddeus would know what to do. But before Mercer could reach for his phone, the air filled with the growl of approaching engines and the crunch of tires on gravel. "Police, don't move!" The voice was harsh, authoritative, Sergeant Boyd Kincaid. Mercer recognized it from community meetings at school. Confusion flooded Mercer's mind. "What's happening?" he called out, his voice wavering slightly. "This is my service dog." "I said don't move," Kincaid barked. Multiple footsteps approached rapidly from different directions. Harbor's body tensed beneath Mercer's hand, the dog's training warring with his protective instincts. "Please," Mercer tried again. "I'm blind, and Harbor is my—" The crack of a taser split the air. Harbor yelped but held his position, shielding Mercer's body with his own. The acrid smell of electricity filled Mercer's nostrils as rough hands grabbed him. "The dog's attacking! Take him down!" "No," Mercer screamed as Harbor was torn away from him. He heard his faithful companion's pained whimpers mixing with the shouts of officers. The world spun in darkness as Mercer was forced to the ground, the cold pavement scraping his cheek. Without Harbor, without his father, without any sense of direction, terror gripped him. The weight of a knee pressed into his back, handcuffs bit into his wrists. Mercer could barely breathe, could barely think through the chaos of voices and hands and pain. His glasses had been knocked off in the struggle, and he could feel the sting of road rash on his face. Time seemed to stretch and compress. Mercer had no way to measure how long he lay there, cheek against the rough concrete, listening to Harbor's distressed sounds somewhere nearby. Then a familiar voice cut through the chaos like a lighthouse beam through fog. "What in God's name are you doing? That's my son!" Thaddeus Lane's footsteps pounded toward them. "He's blind! The dog is his service animal!" "Sir, stay back. This is a police matter." Kincaid's voice held a warning edge. "Like hell it is!" Thaddeus roared. "You're assaulting a disabled child. Get those cuffs off him now!" The pressure on Mercer's back finally lifted. As the handcuffs were removed, gentle hands, His father's hands carefully helped him sit up. "Dad?" Mercer's voice cracked. "I'm here, son. I'm here." Thaddeus's voice shook with barely contained rage. "Harbor's here too. They hurt him, but he's alive." Mercer heard Harbor's tags jingling as the dog dragged himself closer, whining softly. Mercer reached out with trembling fingers until he felt the familiar fur, wet in spots that made his stomach turn. "He needs a vet," Mercer whispered. "You're both going to the emergency room right now," Thaddeus declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And then we're going to deal with this." "Sir," Sergeant Kincaid's voice had taken on an oddly conciliatory tone. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Thaddeus's voice was deadly quiet. "You tasered a service dog and assaulted my blind son. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime." Mercer felt his father's arms wrap around him, lifting him carefully. Harbor struggled to his feet, still faithfully staying close despite his injuries. The walk to his father's truck passed in a blur of pain and confusion, with Thaddeus helping first Harbor, then Mercer into the back seat. As they drove toward the hospital, Mercer could hear his father's knuckles cracking on the steering wheel. The truck's engine rumbled with barely contained fury, matching Thaddeus's breathing. Mercer reached forward, his hand finding his father's shoulder. "Dad? They're not going to tell the truth about this, are they?" Thaddeus's shoulder tensed under Mercer's touch. "No, son, they're not. But that doesn't mean we won't fight for it." Harbor's head rested heavily on Mercer's lap. The dog's breathing labored but steady. Mercer ran his fingers through the familiar fur, finding the spots where the taser had left its mark. His own scrapes and bruises throbbed, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the sick feeling in his stomach. He had recognized that sound from the hit and run. He had been about to report it. And somehow, instead of being helped, he and Harbor had been attacked. None of it made sense, yet a terrible understanding was beginning to dawn. The emergency room lights buzzed overhead as medical staff moved quickly around them. Mercer sat on an examination table, one hand still buried in Harbor's fur, while a doctor cleaned the scrapes on his face. The dog refused to leave his side, despite the veterinarian who had been called in to treat his injuries. Thaddeus paced the small room, his footsteps a measured cadence that couldn't quite hide his agitation. Mercer could hear him on the phone, speaking in low, controlled tones to someone, probably their family lawyer. The whole scene felt surreal, like a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. But the pain was real, the fear was real, and the truth about what Mercer had heard by the river, now felt more important than ever. As the doctor applied the last bandage, Mercer turned his face toward where he knew his father stood. "Dad?" "Yes, son?" "They're going to try to make us quiet about this, aren't they?" A long pause followed, broken only by Harbor's soft whimper as the vet treated his burns. Finally, Thaddeus spoke, his voice tight with emotion. "They might try, but we're not going to let them." Mercer nodded, his hand finding Harbor's head again. His faithful companion had taken a taser rather than leave his side. Now it was Mercer's turn to be brave. "Good," he said softly, "because I need to tell you what I heard today, what I really heard, before everything went wrong." The examination room fell quiet, save for the steady beep of medical equipment and Harbor's rhythmic breathing. In that moment, father and son faced the weight of what lay ahead, a system that would try to bury their truth, and the long fight to bring it into the light. The harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room cast stark shadows as a young officer in uniform slipped quietly through the door. Her badge read Voss, and her eyes held a mixture of concern and guilt as she approached Mercer's bed. "I'm Officer Nia Voss," she said softly, glancing at Thaddeus, who stood protectively near his son. "I was there during the incident. I wanted to check how you both were doing." Harbor lifted his head from where he lay beside Mercer's bed, watching the newcomer carefully. The bandages on his flank were stark white against his yellow fur. "We're managing," Thaddeus replied stiffly, his arms crossed. Naya shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, I need to tell you something. The department—" She lowered her voice. "They're already working on the official narrative. The body cams from today, they're claiming technical malfunctions, all of them." Thaddeus's jaw clenched. "Convenient." "Very," Naya agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sergeant Kincaid's preliminary report is already being filed. He's painting it as a non-compliant subject resisting lawful commands." "Non-compliant?" Mercer spoke up, his voice steady despite the bruising visible on his face. "I was standing still. Harbor was in his service vest. We weren't doing anything wrong." "I know," Nia said, her conscience clearly weighing heavy. "That's why I'm here. But you need to understand. They're going to shape this story their way. It's already starting." As if on cue, Thaddeus's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, his expression darkening as he scrolled. "Local talk radio," he growled. "They're calling it a routine stop that went wrong due to lack of cooperation. They're saying I'm an opportunist looking for a lawsuit." Mercer's hands tightened in Harbor's fur. "But that's not what happened. I know what I heard by the river. That engine sound. It was the same one from the hit and run last week. I'm certain of it." Nia looked between father and son, conflict clear on her face. "I want to help, but your department's already circling the wagons," Thaddeus finished for her. She nodded miserably. "You should file a formal complaint. It won't change their story, but it creates an official record." "Already done," Thaddeus said. "My lawyer filed it an hour ago." "Good," Naya said. "Just be prepared. This isn't going to be easy." She turned to leave, then paused. "I'm sorry. For all of it." After she left, Mercer sat quietly, processing. "Dad, people are really going to believe their version, aren't they?" Thaddeus sighed heavily. "Some will. People trust uniforms and badges. They want to believe the system works." "But it doesn't," Mercer said softly. "Not today, it didn't." The discharge process took another hour. By the time they left, social media was already buzzing with opinions and accusations. Thaddeus helped Mercer and Harbor into the truck, trying to shield his son from the whispers and stares of hospital staff who had clearly seen the posts. The drive home was tense. Harbor lay in the back seat, his breathing steady but his usual alertness dampened by pain medication. Mercer kept one hand on his dog, drawing strength from the contact. As they pulled onto their street, Thaddeus slowed the truck. Their neighbors were out, pretending not to watch while stealing obvious glances. Mrs. Peterson, who usually brought over cookies, quickly went inside. Mr. Johnson, who had helped install their wheelchair ramp last year, suddenly became very interested in his garden. "They're avoiding us," Mercer said quietly. "They don't know what to think," Thaddeus replied, pulling into their driveway. "People want simple stories, good guys and bad guys. When something challenges that, it makes them uncomfortable." Getting Harbor inside was a careful process. The big lab tried to move normally, but his limp was obvious. Still, he stayed close to Mercer, his protective instincts unchanged by his injuries. Inside, Thaddeus helped Mercer settle, on the couch while Harbor positioned himself at his feet. The dog's usual vigilance was evident even through his pain, his eyes tracking every movement, every sound. "What do we do now?" Mercer asked, his fingers finding the familiar spots behind Harbor's ears. Thaddeus sat beside his son, his voice firm with conviction. "We fight. We fight their lie with the truth. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but we don't back down from what's right." "They want me to be just another headline," Mercer said, Just another unfortunate incident they can explain away. You're not a headline, Thaddeus assured him. You're my son, and you know what you heard. Mercer nodded, his hand still steady on Harbor's head. That engine sound, the rattle whistle when it downshifts, I'd know it anywhere. It's the same one from the hit and run, I'm sure of it. Then we start there, Thaddeus said. The truth has a way of coming out, son. Sometimes it just needs people brave enough to stand by it. Harbor shifted closer to Mercer, his warmth a constant reminder of unwavering loyalty. Despite his injuries, the dog's presence remained a source of strength and stability, a silent promise that some bonds couldn't be broken by force or lies. Outside, they could hear cars slowing as they passed the house, could feel the weight of unseen eyes and unspoken judgments. But inside, father and son sat together, their resolve strengthening. They had truth on their side, and they had each other. For now, that would have to be enough. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the living room windows as Mercer sat at the kitchen table, his fingers moving across his Braille notebook. The sound has this specific pattern, he explained to his father. When the engine downshifts, there's this rattle whistle combination that's completely unique. I could pick it out of 100 trucks. Thaddeus watched his son's confident movements, pride mixing with concern. You're sure about this, son? Absolutely sure, Mercer replied. The pitch changes at around 2,000 RPM, and then there's this metallic catch that... A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Harbor's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Thaddeus moved to answer it, finding a well-dressed man with a neatly trimmed white beard standing on their porch. Mr. Lane, Morton Vale, City Attorney's Office. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. May I come in? Just a friendly conversation about recent events? Thaddeus hesitated, then stepped aside. Vale entered, his expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. Harbor positioned himself closer to Mercer, still growling softly. Remarkable animal, Vale observed, eyeing the service dog. Though I understand he was quite aggressive during the incident. Harbor was protecting me, Mercer said firmly. He did his job. Vale's voice took on a patronizing tone. Young man, I understand you believe you heard something significant by the river, but memory can be tricky, especially when we're stressed or scared. I know what I heard, Mercer insisted. The same truck from the hit and run. That's quite an accusation, Vale said smoothly, and inventive witnesses can face serious consequences, particularly when their statements damage the reputation of public servants. Thaddeus stepped forward. Are you threatening my son? Not at all, Vale smiled that empty smile again. Simply pointing out potential complications. False statements, obstruction of justice, these are serious matters. I'd hate to see charges filed against such a young person. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Harbor's growl deepened. I think we're done here, Thaddeus said firmly. Any further communication can go through our lawyer. Vale nodded, unruffled. As you wish. Do consider what I've said, though. Some stories are better left untold. He showed himself out, leaving behind a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Later that night, as Mercer was getting ready for bed, Harbor suddenly stiffened. A low rumble of an engine approached, different from the usual traffic. Mercer froze, listening intently. Dad, he called out. That's it. That's the sound. Thaddeus rushed to the window. A dark truck crawled past their house, its driver hidden behind a mask. The engine revved aggressively, rattle whistle clear in the night air, before the vehicle disappeared down the street. They're trying to scare us, Mercer said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Well, they picked the wrong family to intimidate, Thaddeus replied, already reaching for his phone to document the incident. He dialed a number. Blythe? Thaddeus Lane. We need to talk. The next morning, Blythe Carr arrived at their house, her weathered notepad ready. The investigative reporter listened intently as they detailed everything. The assault, Vale's visit, and the nighttime intimidation. They're banking on fear and silence, Blythe said, making careful notes. But a blind kid who can identify vehicles by sound? That's a story people need to hear. Thaddeus spent the afternoon installing security cameras around their house and shop. Mercer worked on detailed notes about the truck's sound signature, breaking down the specific mechanical elements that made it unique. The rattle comes first, he explained to Blythe, his fingers moving across his braille notes. Then the whistle kicks in at higher RPMs. It's probably a loose heat shield combined with a modified exhaust system. Most people wouldn't notice, but to me, it's like a fingerprint. And you're willing to go on record with this? Blythe asked. Even after Vale's threats? Mercer nodded firmly. They hurt Harbor. They're trying to cover up a hit and run. Someone has to stand up to them. That evening, Vale called again. His tone was silk over steel. Final chance, Mr. Lane. Drop this now, or your son faces charges. We both know how these things can go. Thaddeus's reply was cold. We both know how these things can go when the truth comes out, too. Goodbye, Mr. Vale. After hanging up, Thaddeus found Mercer sitting with Harbor, the dog's head in his lap. You okay, son? They think because I can't see, I don't know what I know, Mercer said quietly. But I heard that truck. I heard it kill someone, and now I've heard it twice more. I'm not backing down. Thaddeus sat beside them, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Neither am I. We've got security cameras up. Blythe's working on the story, and we're documenting everything. They can't intimidate us if we stand together. Harbor pressed closer to Mercer, his steady presence a reminder of unwavering loyalty. The service dog's burns were healing, but his protective instinct remained as strong as ever. I'm going to prove what I heard, Mercer said, his voice filled with quiet determination. They can threaten us all they want, but they can't change the truth. That truck is out there, and I know its sound. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows it too. Blythe Carr sat at the Lane's kitchen table, her weathered notepad open before her. Afternoon light streamed through the window, catching the auburn highlights in her pulled-back hair. She watched as Mercer's fingers moved confidently across his braille notes, Harbor lying vigilant at his feet. Tell me everything again, she said, pen poised. Every detail matters. Before Mercer could begin, a soft knock at the back door made Harbor's ears prick up. Thaddeus opened it to reveal Officer Naya Voss, still in uniform but clearly off duty, her eyes darting nervously. I shouldn't be here, she said in a low voice, but you need to know something. Blythe's journalist instincts sharpened. She recognized the look of someone carrying a dangerous truth. The bolo that night, the one describing Mercer's clothing. Nia glanced over her shoulder. I checked the timestamp. It went out moments before the stop, but after the hit and run. Hours after. Thaddeus leaned forward. You're saying they fabricated it? I'm saying the timing doesn't add up. Nia's hands twisted together. Internal Affairs pulled me in yesterday, made it clear my career would be over if I spoke up. Blythe's pen moved rapidly across her pad. Who issued the bolo? Sergeant Kincaid. Nia's voice barely carried. And that's not all that doesn't add up. The name triggered something in Blythe's memory. She'd covered a civil rights lawsuit involving Boyd Kincaid years ago. Excessive force, charges dropped under mysterious circumstances. But there was something else. Kincaid, she muttered, flipping through her notes. Any relation to Wyatt Kincaid? Naya's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. "His son," Thaddeus confirmed, "known around town for racing that lifted blue pickup of his, always causing trouble at bars, but charges never stick." Blythe felt the pieces clicking together. A family cover-up, the fabricated bolo, convenient body cam failures, the intimidation. It's not random, it's coordinated. Mercer leaned forward, his hands steady on Harbor's head. "The truck that came by last night, I can describe every detail of its sound." "Tell me," Blythe said, turning to a fresh page. For the next 30 minutes, Mercer broke down the acoustic signature with remarkable precision. The specific rattle-whistle combination, the timing of the sound against engine RPMs, the particular way the modified exhaust system created a unique resonance. "Most engines have a basic pattern," Mercer explained. "But this one's different. The rattle comes from something loose in the chassis or exhaust system, probably a heat shield. The whistle kicks in at higher RPMs, but it's not a normal turbo sound. It's more mechanical, like air flowing through a damaged component." Blythe's pen stopped moving. "Wait, you're saying this sound is from damage?" "Has to be," Mercer nodded. "It's too irregular to be intentional." "And consistent?" Blythe pressed. "You've heard it 3 times now?" "Exactly the same. The night of the hit and run, during the stop, and last night." Blythe looked up at Thaddeus, excitement building. "This is probative evidence, a damaged vehicle making a unique sound consistently identified by someone with enhanced auditory skills. That's not just circumstantial." Nia shifted uncomfortably. "Wyatt's truck has been modified so many times the mechanics at his shop can barely keep track." "His shop?" Thaddeus asked sharply. "Kincaid and Sons Auto, where he works with his father's friend." Nia stood, checking her watch. "I need to go. I wasn't here." After she left, Blythe organized her notes, mind racing. "We need to approach this strategically. The sound identification is strong, but we need more. Harbor was there for both incidents. Dogs can recognize specific vehicles by scent. And Harbor's training makes him an expert witness in his own right," Thaddeus added, understanding dawning. "Plus, he was injured during the stop. There's a documented connection." Mercer reached down to scratch behind Harbor's ears. "They thought nobody would believe me because I can't see, but they didn't count on what I can hear or what Harbor can smell. Or what people can piece together," Blythe said, underlining key points in her notes. "The bolo timing is crucial. It proves premeditation in the false stop. Combined with the body cam failures and the intimidation attempts, it shows a pattern of cover-up." "All leading back to the Kincaids," Thaddeus finished grimly. "We need to move carefully," Blythe warned. "Build our case methodically, document everything. The sound signature, Harbor's reactions, the bolo timing, it all matters. But they'll fight back hard once they realize what we're doing." "They already are," Mercer said quietly. "But we have something they don't." "What's that?" Blythe asked. "The truth." Mercer's hand found Harbor's fur again. "And they can't intimidate that away." Blythe looked at her notes, at the web of connections forming on the page. The fabricated bolo that came too late to be genuine. The body cams that failed at the perfect moment. A father with a history of buried misconduct and a son known for reckless driving. And at the center, a blind boy who could identify a damaged truck by its unique sound, backed by a trained service dog who could confirm it by scent. The pieces were there. Now they just had to put them together in a way that not even the Kincaids could tear apart. The early morning fog clung to the riverside lot like a protective blanket. Blythe Carr had chosen this spot carefully, far enough from prying eyes but close enough to the highway to make sense for a collection of trucks. She checked her watch again, then surveyed the 5 pickup trucks she'd convinced local mechanics to loan her under the guise of a feature story about Port Huron's automotive culture. Each one's a Ford F-Series, she explained to Mercer, who stood with Harbor beside his father. Different years, different modifications. We'll run them one at a time. Thaddeus squeezed his son's shoulder. You sure about this? I'm sure. Mercer nodded, his hand steady on Harbor's harness. The yellow lab's burn scars were still visible, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Officer Nia Voss emerged from the shadows, her civilian clothes a stark change from her usual uniform. I can give you 15 minutes before shift change. After that, radio chatter might pick up about vehicles gathering here. Procedure? Blythe asked quietly. Document everything. Video, audio, multiple witnesses, chain of custody matters, even for informal identification. Nia's voice was barely above a whisper. And whatever you find, don't report it through official channels first. They'll bury it. Thaddeus positioned Mercer and Harbor behind a concrete barrier, well away from the testing area. Safety first, always. The barrier would help focus the sound, too, creating clean audio conditions for identification. Ready? Blythe called out to her first volunteer driver. The first truck rumbled to life, a 2012 model with aftermarket exhaust. Mercer listened intently as the engine idled, then revved through several RPM ranges. He shook his head. Wrong pitch entirely. The whistle isn't there. The second and third trucks produced similar results. Mercer remained focused, Harbor alert beside him. The fourth truck, a newer model, earned barely 10 seconds of consideration before Mercer waved it off. Then came the blue 2009 F-150. The moment it started, Mercer's posture changed. His head tilted slightly, the way it did when he was concentrating deeply. Harbor's ears perked forward. Rev it through slowly, Mercer called out. From idle to 2,000 RPM. The engine note climbed steadily. Around 1,600 RPM, a distinctive mechanical whistle cut through the morning air, accompanied by a rattling that seemed to emanate from beneath the truck. That's it, Mercer said, his voice tight with certainty. The cracked manifold creates that specific whistle, and there's a warped cooling fan that adds a secondary pitch at higher RPMs. It's exactly what I heard that night. Blythe scribbled furiously in her notepad. You're sure about the mechanical causes? I grew up in my dad's shop, Mercer explained. Every engine tells a story if you know how to listen. That whistle comes from a crack letting exhaust leak past the manifold gasket. The rattle is probably a heat shield working loose. And the fan, it's like a playing card in bicycle spokes, but at engine speeds. Thaddeus was already moving toward the truck, his experienced eye scanning for details. The license plate was partially obscured by mud. Accidentally or deliberately, he couldn't tell. Harbor, Mercer called softly. Check. The Labrador moved forward purposefully, nose working. He sniffed Mercer's jacket, the one from the night of the assault, preserved in a plastic bag until now, then moved to the truck's front end. His tail went rigid, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Scent match, Mercer confirmed. He's certain. Blythe looked at Nia, who had been filming the entire process on her personal phone. How solid is this as evidence? A blind witness with documented acute hearing identifying specific mechanical issues, backed by a trained service dog's scent recognition? It's circumstantial but compelling, especially with the dog's training credentials and the documented injuries they both sustained during the stop. Thaddeus knelt by the truck's front tire, phone camera carefully documenting details. Recent alignment issues, consistent with impact damage, and look at this paint transfer on the bumper. It's been hastily touched up. We need to move fast, Blythe said, already composing the story in her head. Once they realize we can connect this truck to both incidents, it'll disappear into a chop shop or wind up at the bottom of the river. Nia checked her phone. Shift change in 3 minutes. We need to clear out. As they quickly dispersed the volunteer vehicles, Mercer stood with his hand buried in Harbor's fur, face thoughtful. They thought not being able to see meant I couldn't be a witness, but Harbor and we notice things others miss. You both noticed plenty, Thaddeus said, pride evident in his voice. And now we have something solid to work with. Chain of evidence, Blythe repeated, organizing her notes. We document everything in multiple formats, back up all files to secure locations, and we move quickly but carefully. One false step, and they'll have an excuse to discredit everything. The fog was beginning to lift as they prepared to leave, revealing the first glimpse of morning sun on the river. For the first time since the assault, Thaddeus felt real hope. They had identified a specific vehicle. They had evidence of its involvement. Most importantly, they had witnesses who couldn't be easily dismissed. A blind boy with extraordinary hearing, a trained service dog with professional credentials, and a growing circle of allies willing to stand up to the corruption. "What's our next move?" Mercer asked as they walked to their car. "We build on what we have," Thaddeus replied, helping Harbor into the back seat. "We've got the truck identified. Now we document everything, gather more evidence, and make sure the truth comes out in a way they can't bury." Blythe closed her notebook with determination. "We've got momentum now. Let's use it." They parted ways quickly, each carrying a piece of the puzzle they'd assembled that morning. The suspect truck's unique sound signature, Harbor's scent confirmation, and most importantly, the growing coalition of people willing to stand against the cover-up. For the first time since that terrible night by the river, they had more than just suspicions. They had a target, they had evidence, and they had hope. The morning after identifying the truck, Thaddeus drove past Red Line Salvage on his way to open the shop. His heart sank at what he saw. Through the chain-link fence, workers were already cutting apart a familiar blue Ford F-150. The distinctive sound signature would soon be silenced forever, piece by piece. He pulled over, hands shaking as he dialed Blythe's number. "They're destroying it right now. The truck. They're cutting it up at Red Line." "Marcus Kincaid's brother-in-law owns that yard," Blythe said grimly. "I'll be there in 10 minutes with my camera." But by the time she arrived, the truck's cab was already separated from its frame. Workers pointedly ignored her attempts to photograph what remained, and the office staff claimed they had no record of when the vehicle had been brought in. Back at the police station, Nia Voss found her locker emptied, her badge and service weapon already collected. The suspension notice cited unauthorized disclosure of confidential information. Her captain wouldn't meet her eyes as she was escorted out. "You knew what would happen," he said quietly at the door. "The Kincaids have long memories." Nia squared her shoulders. "So do I, sir. And I'll remember who stood up and who stood by." The morning's blows kept coming. Thaddeus arrived at his auto shop to find "Grifter" sprayed across the bay doors in jagged red letters. The paint was still tacky. This was fresh intimidation, a message left in the pre-dawn hours. He was photographing the damage when Mercer called from home. "Dad, Harbor's acting strange. He keeps pawing at the garage door and whining." "Don't go in there," Thaddeus said sharply. "I'm on my way." He made it home in record time to find Mercer and Harbor waiting in the front yard. The Labrador's agitation was visible. His ears were back, and he kept trying to herd Mercer further from the garage. "What do you smell?" "Buddy?" Mercer asked, one hand buried in Harbor's fur. Thaddeus approached the garage carefully. The sweet, distinctive odor hit him before he even reached the door. Gas. He pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. "Get the neighbors evacuated," he told Mercer, keeping his voice steady. "Now." The next few minutes were controlled chaos. Neighbors stumbled out in bathrobes as Thaddeus went door to door. Fire trucks arrived with lights flashing but sirens silent, trying not to create sparks. The gas company representative located the loosened line quickly. It hadn't failed naturally. Someone had deliberately created the leak. They were still evacuating the last house when it happened. The old freezer in the Lane's garage cycled on, its compressor throwing a spark. The explosion knocked Thaddeus off his feet. Heat washed over him as flames erupted from the garage. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Mercer calling his name. "I'm okay," he shouted back, scrambling up. "Stay with Harbor." Fire crews swarmed in, containing the blaze before it could spread to the house. In the chaos, Thaddeus found himself sitting on the curb beside Mercer and Harbor, all three of them coated in ash and smoke. "If Harbor hadn't woken you up..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Mercer hugged his dog close. He knew something was wrong. He wouldn't stop pawing at me until I got up. Blythe arrived as the fire marshal was confirming what they already knew. The gas line had been deliberately tampered with. She documented everything. The damaged line, the explosion pattern, Harbor's alert behavior, and the timing coming right after they'd identified the truck. "They tried to kill us," Mercer said quietly. The words hung in the smoke-filled air. Thaddeus pulled his son close, feeling Harbor press against both their legs. "They tried, they failed, and now they've shown exactly what they're capable of." The fire crews were rolling up their hoses when Blythe finished her interviews. "This changes everything," she said. "Attempted murder means outside agencies, state police, maybe federal. No more keeping it in-house." Thaddeus watched another fire truck pull away, its lights painting red streaks through the lingering smoke. In one morning, they'd lost their evidence, their inside ally, and nearly their lives. But looking at Mercer, alive, unharmed, still holding tight to Harbor, he felt something harder than fear crystallize inside him. "Whatever it takes," he said, his voice granite firm. "Whatever we have to do, whoever we have to call, they tried to kill my son, this ends now." Mercer's hand found his in the gray morning light. Harbor's tail brushed both their legs as emergency vehicles continued to circle, their sirens fading into the distance. The air still smelled of smoke and fear, but underneath it was something stronger. The steel certainty of a father who'd seen the true face of what they were fighting, and would stop at nothing to end it. The smoke would clear. The evidence would be rebuilt. But nothing would erase the line that had been crossed, the moment when intimidation became attempted murder, and a father's protective instincts became an immovable force aimed straight at the heart of corruption. Nia's hands shook as she approached the coffee shop. She'd chosen this spot carefully, busy enough to blend in, but quiet enough to talk. The flash drive felt like it weighed 100 pounds in her pocket. Blythe Carr sat in a corner booth, nursing a cooling cup of coffee. Their eyes met briefly as Nia slid into the seat across from her. "I could lose everything for this," Nia said quietly, her fingers curling around the drive. "My badge, my pension, maybe worse." Blythe nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. "I'll protect my source, always have." Under the table, Nia passed the drive. "It's dispatch audio from that night, before the convenient equipment failures. I pulled a copy when Internal Affairs started pressing me to change my statement." "Why risk it?" Blythe asked, though she already knew the answer. Nia's eyes hardened. "Because they tried to kill a 12-year-old boy and his dog, because that's not what I signed up for." Back at the Chronicle's office, Blythe plugged in the drive with trembling fingers. The timestamp showed 10:15 p.m. on the night of the hit and run. Static crackled, then voices emerged. "Please, you can't be here!" A shaky voice, young and scared. "Someone saw—" "Shut up!" Sergeant Boyd Kincaid's voice, unmistakable. "I'll fix this. You weren't here, understand?" More voices, radio chatter, then the fabricated bolo description matching Mercer's clothes exactly. broadcast 45 minutes before the staged stop. Blythe called Thaddeus immediately. Within an hour, they gathered in her office. Thaddeus, Mercer, and Harbor lying vigilant at the boy's feet. She played the audio twice. "That's the same engine sound," Mercer said firmly, right before Kincaid speaks. "The rattle-whistle combo." Thaddeus's face was stone. "They staged the whole thing, used my son as a diversion." "We need to move fast," Blythe said. "That truck's sitting in Redline salvage right now, probably waiting for the torch." "Not if we can help it." Thaddeus pulled out his phone. "I know a judge who owes me for keeping his classic Mustang running. Time to call in that favor." The emergency injunction came through by sunset. No vehicles could leave Redline salvage, and nothing could be destroyed or altered. Thaddeus had also contacted the state police and FBI, sending them copies of everything. The audio, Mercer's sound analysis, Harbor's scent identification, the garage sabotage evidence. They gathered that evening in Blythe's office to plan. Mercer sat with his parabolic microphone, a gift from an audio engineer who'd read about his case. Harbor hadn't left his side since the explosion. "The feds will be watching," Blythe explained. "But we need rock-solid identification. Mercer, you'll be safely outside the fence with the mic, if you hear that truck." "I'll know it," Mercer said firmly. "Harbor will confirm the scent. They can't hide it anymore." Thaddeus studied the salvage yard blueprints spread across Blythe's desk. "2 main entrances, loading dock and back. We'll need eyes on all of them." "State police will have undercover units in place," Blythe assured him. "The feds are treating this as a civil rights case now. Attempted murder tends to get their attention." Mercer ran his fingers over his microphone's controls, a habit that helped him focus. "What if they've already destroyed it?" "Then we'll prove that too," Thaddeus said. "Either way, we're doing this legally, by the book. No more chances for them to cry harassment." The plan came together piece by piece. Observation points were chosen, teams assigned. They would move at first light when the salvage yard opened. Federal observers would ensure everything stayed clean and documented. "You're both still in danger," Blythe warned. "They're desperate now." "We know." Thaddeus put his hand on Mercer's shoulder. "But we're done hiding, done being afraid." Mercer nodded, one hand buried in Harbor's fur. "They tried to silence us, tried to hurt Harbor, tried to—" He swallowed hard. "Tried to kill us. But we're still here, and we have proof now." They left Blythe's office as the sun set, preparations complete. Tomorrow would bring either victory or another dead end, but tonight they had something they'd lacked before: hard evidence, and the law on their side. Harbor pressed close to Mercer as they walked to the car, his presence steady and unchanging. The dog had proven himself more than just a guide. He was a protector, a hero, and living proof that courage came in many forms. "Ready for tomorrow, buddy?" Mercer asked softly. Harbor's tail wagged once, firm and sure. Like all of them, he knew his role in what was coming. The truth they'd fought so hard to protect was finally within reach. The night air hung heavy over Redline salvage. Shadows stretched long across rusted metal and stacked cars, broken only by the dim security lights that dotted the yard's perimeter. Mercer sat in the back of an unmarked van, his parabolic microphone ready, with Harbor lying silently at his feet. Blythe's voice came soft through their secure radio channel. "Federal observers are in position. Deputies standing by at all exits." Through his headphones, Mercer could hear the nighttime sounds of the salvage yard with crystal clarity. Crickets chirping, the hum of distant traffic, and the occasional clang of metal on metal from inside the bays. Thaddeus stayed close to his son, one hand resting protectively on Mercer's shoulder. "You've got this," he whispered. "Just like we practiced." Inside the yard's main building, grinding sounds started up, followed by the distinct hiss of cutting torches. Mercer adjusted his microphone, tracking each new sound methodically. "They're working late," Blythe observed through the radio. "Third shift isn't normal for Redline." Mercer's fingers moved steadily across his equipment's controls, fine-tuning the reception. Harbor's ears perked up at each new sound, but the dog remained perfectly still, trained to minimize noise during these crucial moments. "Multiple torches now," Mercer reported quietly. "Bay 3? No. Moving to Bay 4. His hands never stopped adjusting, searching. The grinding sounds intensified. Through his headphones, Mercer could hear the distinct layers of industrial noise, the sharp whine of power tools, the deeper rumble of heavy equipment, the hiss of torches eating through metal. Then he caught it, faint but unmistakable, the distinctive rattle-whistle combination, exactly as he'd heard it by the river, exactly as he'd documented in his sound notes. His hand squeezed his father's arm. "That's it," Mercer whispered urgently. "Bay 4, the manifold rattle with the fan whistle overlay. Same RPM pattern. It's running." Thaddeus keyed his radio. "Confirmed sound match in Bay 4. Repeat, positive ID on target vehicle." Blythe's voice crackled back. "Federal observers verifying. Deputies moving into position." Mercer kept his microphone locked on the sound, recording every second. The engine noise rose and fell, that unique mechanical signature unchanging. Harbor's tail thumped once against the van's floor. He could smell it too, even from this distance. "All units ready," came the Federal coordinator's voice. "Move on my mark." The night seemed to hold its breath. Mercer could hear his own heartbeat through the headphones, counting the seconds. They were so close now, after everything. The assault, the lies, the explosion, the threats. Justice waited just yards away. "Execute," the coordinator commanded. The salvage yard erupted into motion. Powerful floodlights snapped on, turning night to day. Harbor pressed close to Mercer as the sound of breaking doors echoed through the headphones, followed by shouted commands and the thunder of boots on concrete. "Bay 4 secured," a deputy reported. "Vehicle in place, 2 suspects in custody." Mercer lowered his microphone slowly, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The unique engine sound cut off abruptly, leaving only the chaos of the raid in his ears. "You did it, son," Thaddeus said softly, his voice thick with pride. "You found it." Harbor's tail wagged as he pressed his nose into Mercer's hand, offering silent congratulations of his own. Through the open van doors, they could hear the continued commotion as law enforcement secured the scene. "Evidence teams moving in," Blythe reported. "They're documenting everything. That truck isn't going anywhere except into federal custody." The floodlights continued to blaze, transforming the salvage yard into a brilliant stage where truth would finally overcome deception. After weeks of fear and fury, of pain and persistence, they had done it. The proof was preserved, the suspects contained, and justice, so long delayed, was finally within reach. Through the chaos of the raid, a sharp crack split the air, followed by the distinct splash of liquid. The acrid smell of solvent filled Bay 4 as Sergeant Kincaid, his face twisted with desperate fury, flung containers across the concrete floor. "Dad!" Mercer called out in alarm, his keen ears picking up the distinctive whoosh of accelerant catching fire. The flames roared to life with frightening speed, feeding on the spilled chemicals. Thaddeus bolted toward the bay, driven by his son's voice. "Mercer, stay back." But his warning came too late. A thunderous crack echoed through the building as a support beam, weakened by the intense heat, gave way. Thaddeus dove to avoid it, but the heavy metal caught him across the legs, pinning him to the floor. Smoke billowed thick and black, carrying the toxic stench of burning chemicals. Through the haze, Kincaid drew his service weapon, the metallic click of the safety releasing cutting through the chaos. "Nobody moves!" Kincaid shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Stay back or I'll shoot!" Harbor pressed against Mercer's leg, whining softly but refusing to retreat. The loyal dog crawled low beneath the smoke, trying to reach Thaddeus. Mercer coughed as the acrid smoke filled his lungs, but his other senses sharpened. He could hear everything with crystal clarity: the hungry crackle of spreading flames, the ominous groan of stressed metal overhead, and Kincaid's boots pacing on the concrete floor, each step betraying his position. "Federal agents, stand down!" Blythe's voice carried from outside, tight with urgency. "We need fire crews in here now." The heat grew more intense with each passing second. Mercer could feel it on his face, sense the way it changed the air currents around him. The triumph of identifying the truck mere minutes ago had transformed into a nightmare. "Dad?" Mercer called out, his voice rough from the smoke. "I'm here, son," Thaddeus answered, strain evident in his words. "But you need to get out, now." "Not without you." Mercer took a step forward, Harbor still faithfully at his side. "I said stay back." Kincaid's voice cracked like a whip, followed by the shuffle of his boots as he adjusted his aim. The fire roared louder, consuming evidence and hope alike. Metal groaned overhead as more of the structure weakened. Time was running out as the flames advanced, trapping them all in a deadly standoff, Thaddeus pinned and helpless, Kincaid desperate and armed, while Mercer stood his ground, refusing to leave his father to the inferno. Through the thick smoke, a metallic clang rang out as a side door swung open. Officer Naya Voss slipped inside, gripping a large red fire extinguisher. Her face was set with determination as she crouched low, moving deliberately toward the chaos in Bay 4. Mercer's head tilted, his acute hearing catching the subtle sound of her approach. The distinctive shuffle of tactical boots, different from Kincaid's heavier tread, told him exactly who had entered. He kept his breathing steady, waiting for the right moment. "Last warning!" Kincaid shouted, his voice edged with panic. "Nobody moves!" Mercer counted Kincaid's steps, tracking his position. When he heard the subtle click of Naya readying the fire extinguisher, he called out clearly, "Harbor, forward!" The Labrador's movement drew Kincaid's attention for a crucial second. The hiss of the extinguisher filled the air as Naya unleashed a powerful spray of foam. Mercer timed his command perfectly. "Harbor, down!" The white chemical cloud engulfed Kincaid, who stumbled backward, coughing and temporarily blinded. His gun hand wavered as he wiped frantically at his eyes. Harbor wiggled beneath the fallen beam, pressing his body against it while Naya rushed forward. "On 3, she called to Mercer. 1, 2. Together they heaved upward, Harbor's strength combining with theirs. The beam shifted just enough for Thaddeus to drag himself free, his pants torn and legs scraped, but nothing broken. "Deputies, move in!" Blythe's voice carried from outside. The main doors burst open as law enforcement flooded the bay, weapons drawn. Through the chaos of shouts and radio static, Mercer heard a different sound, movement from beneath the vehicle lift. Harbor's head snapped toward it, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "There's someone under there," Mercer called out, pointing towards the pit. 2 deputies advanced, their flashlight beams cutting through smoke to reveal Wyatt Kincaid huddled in the service pit. The acrid smell of solvent clung to him as they hauled him out, his hands trembling and clothes soaked with chemicals. Sergeant Kincaid made one last desperate move toward his dropped weapon, but Naya was faster. She kicked the gun away and pinned him with practiced efficiency. "Boyd Kincaid, you're under arrest," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of justice long delayed. As the smoke began to clear, Blythe led a team of evidence technicians into the bay. They recovered a partially melted VIN plate from the remains of the truck, its numbers still legible enough to prove ownership. More importantly, Mercer's parabolic microphone recording remained intact, its digital memory preserving the distinctive engine sound that had started everything. The charges mounted quickly: evidence tampering, assault on a minor, conspiracy to obstruct justice, attempted murder with the gas line sabotage. Within days, Morton Vale submitted his resignation amid a sweeping ethics investigation that exposed years of buried cases and covered tracks. Weeks later, Naya stood before the police review board, her suspension lifted. She testified about everything: the fabricated bolo, the coordinated assault on Mercer, the systematic attempt to discredit a blind child's testimony. Her clear voice never wavered as she detailed how the department had betrayed its oath to protect and serve. Back home, life took on new rhythms. Thaddeus converted a corner of his shop into a tactile workbench with tools arranged in patterns Mercer could easily navigate. They worked side by side, Mercer's fingers learning the languages of engines through touch and sound. "Feel that timing belt?" Thaddeus guided his son's hand. "The wear pattern tells you everything about how it was running." Mercer nodded, his face bright with concentration. "Like a fingerprint in rubber." In the yard behind their house, Mercer designed an obstacle course for Harbor: platforms at different heights, tunnels made from old pipes, and bells that rang when tasks were completed correctly. The Labrador took to the challenges with enthusiasm, his tail wagging as Mercer praised each success. "Good boy, Harbor," Mercer would say, his hand finding the dog's scarred flank. "We did it together." The local paper ran a feature about them, not as victims this time, but as examples of persistence and courage. The photo showed Mercer and Harbor navigating his homemade maze while Thaddeus looked on with quiet pride. The caption read, "Local boy and service dog show true partnership." One afternoon, as father and son sat on their front porch, Thaddeus asked, "Do you ever think about that night at the river? About what might have happened if you hadn't recognized that sound?" Mercer stroked Harbor's head, considering. "Sometimes, but mostly I think about how we didn't let them make us afraid. How we stood up together." Harbor's tail thumped against the porch boards in agreement, and Thaddeus reached over to squeeze his son's shoulder. They had emerged from the darkness carrying scars, but also carrying something else: an unshakable certainty in each other, in justice, and in their own strength to face whatever came next. The evening air carried the scent of approaching autumn, and Harbor's ears perked at the sound of neighborhood children playing nearby. It was a peaceful sound, normal and right, the kind of moment they had fought to preserve. Mercer smiled, his fingers moving confidently over his latest project plans, while Thaddeus watched his son work with quiet amazement at the young man he was becoming. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.